Pete Hegseth's absolutely brutal debut tour of Europe, his very first overseas trip as a member of Donald Trump's cabinet, and why it is really becoming a case study in how not to handle international diplomacy. Now, I know a lot of you aren't going to be surprised about this because many of you have been worried, maybe appointing a TV personality from Fox News to run the Pentagon is not a good idea. Maybe it would backfire. And if that was what you were thinking, you're completely correct. So first is the big headline. Picking your cabinet by watching Fox News is a bad idea. It's a disaster waiting to happen. And Hegseth had barely taken the oath of office before jetting off to Europe, and it really showed. Right out of the gate, he told NATO and Ukraine that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders was unrealistic, which was effectively signaling to Vladimir Putin that the U.S. might be fine with Russia keeping what it has already taken. This, by the way, is also what has been suggested by Donald Trump to a degree. It's also what's been suggested by J.D. Vance to a degree. It seems to be the position of the Trump administration that Putin is going to get to keep some of what he has stolen. Now, within hours of Hegseth making that statement, both European leaders and Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky went into sort of a high alert mode, demanding to know how is Hegseth giving away so much bargaining power? What authority is he doing that with? And Trump, of course, initially backed Hegseth's stance. Then he watched Hegseth spend the next couple of days actually flailing around and backpedaling and saying, I'm not really in charge of any of this stuff, but I'm just kind of being realistic. Ultimately, it's up to the president. That was the first mess, and it started within hours of this guy landing in Europe. Republican Senator Roger Wicker was furious and said this is a rookie mistake, and said he's parroting the talking points of Tucker Carlson. He's parroting the talking points of someone who sees this as Ukraine having some culpability in what took place, and not really getting a ringing endorsement from his own party even. And it's reminding us that on these foreign policy issues, there is a gap between the rhetoric of people like Hegseth and the reality of international diplomacy, which we need.
Yeah. And a lot of Republicans are more pro-Ukraine than people like Trump and Hegseth and J.D. Vance. But yeah, there's a major disconnect because there are plenty of Republicans within the establishment, actually, who understand how internationalism works. And guys like Pete Hegseth don't understand any of that. He's an unsophisticated rube who really doesn't understand any of that stuff. And David Pakman's about to give you some proof of that with a clip soon here.
Because Hegseth has no business in international diplomacy. Okay, here's another pathetic moment from Pete Hegseth's European adventure. And he just sounds so dumb.
As President Trump has said, but it's not enough. Nor is 3%, nor is 4%, more like 5%. Real investment, real urgency. We can talk all we want about values. Values are important.
Right.
But you can't shoot values.
Uh-oh.
You can't shoot flags, and you can't shoot strong speeches.
Right.
There is no replacement for hard power.
This sounds like an 8th grade speech, like an 8th grade presentation on foreign policy. This is so embarrassing. This person got appointed to government. Like, Trump has got to be laughed out of the room for this pick. But sadly, he got confirmed because the Republicans have the Senate.
As much as we may not want to like the world we live in some cases, there's nothing like hard power.
Hard power. Now, you might be wondering, David, who the hell is this guy? How could he be Secretary of Defense? And it would be a good question. Pete Hegseth is a 44-year-old former National Guard infantryman who was catapulted from the Fox News studio into one of the most important jobs in the federal government, arguably one of the most important jobs in the world when it comes to foreign policy. No deep foreign policy experience, no complex negotiation experience under his belt, just on-camera experience, which maybe helped him get the job. It did, because Trump saw him on Fox News and said, that's the guy I want. But it is not helping him do the job. Now, in Brussels and in Warsaw, Hegseth hammered home themes that suggest he's more worried about immigrants at the southern U.S. border than Republican aggression in Eastern Europe. This coincides with what J.D. Vance said at the Munich Security Conference, which is, I'm more worried about the enemy within the United States than I am about Russia.
That is like Republican gold. Did you ever see those shirts that said, like, I'd rather be Russian than be a Democrat? These people love kissing Russia's butt.
If nothing else, they do seem to be on message. And Hegseth even started the trip by renaming an army base to effectively skirt a federal law banning Confederate names, which I guess the priority is putting Confederate names back on stuff. And if that weren't enough, There's this unproven speculation swirling that Hegseth might have been drinking alcohol during some of his appearances. I'm not saying it's true. These are rumors. He's known to have a drinking problem. He promised he wouldn't drink if he became Secretary of Defense. And there has been speculation that, like, is he drink? You know, it's either apple juice or it's brown liquor. And is the Secretary of Defense really drinking apple juice? It's just all weird. I'm not saying he's drinking alcohol. It's just not the sort of story you want floating around when it's known.
If he's drinking apple juice, that would be kind of based, actually. Apple juice is pretty good.
You have a drinking problem. You've got a brown liquid. You're saying crazy things. Not exactly a reassuring image. But then we get back to the foreign policy. The back and forth about Ukraine's border is especially concerning because it sends mixed signals to allies as well as to Vladimir Putin. Because one day Hegseth is saying Ukraine is not going to get back its lost territory. The next day he's pivoting to, really, it's up to Trump and everybody else to decide. I'm just being realistic. And meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance is openly suggesting U.S. troops could still be deployed if Russia does not negotiate in good faith, which is a direct contradiction to what Hegseth has said, that American forces are simply not going to get involved. It's all happening against the backdrop of Trump's push to slash DEI across the military and across the Department of Defense and its schools. Students in Stuttgart, Germany, even walked out in protest when Hegseth showed up. Think about that for a second. Middle schoolers felt compelled to protest the new defense secretary. That's where we are.
Yeah. When you were in middle school, did you know who the defense secretary was? I didn't. This is how bad Pete Hegseth sucks. Think about that. That is massive.
So if you were hoping for a serious and coherent foreign policy strategy from Trump, Hegseth's debut should probably disabuse you of those expectations pretty quickly. His performance has been chaotic messaging, rookie mistakes, and a total lack of clarity about what is America's role in Eastern Europe. And the bottom line is we're learning in real time why it's a bad idea to pick your defense secretary from your Fox News lineup. This is embarrassing for the administration. It's potentially dangerous for the entire NATO alliance. It's a global security issue we are talking about here. And it's sound bites, half-baked policy declarations that then are pulled back. And if there were any doubts about Hegseth's qualifications, the 72-hour Europe fiasco should confirm we have really good reason to doubt this guy's qualifications.
Yeah. And there's no Democratic equivalent of this, by the way. When was the last time a Democratic president appointed some CNN or MSNBC chucklehead to be Secretary of Defense? It never happened. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Pete Hegseth is a buffoon. Please like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Morris, the Merrier, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.